So, welcome to the Spots of Time podcast. I'm Angela Kanwar. The podcast is about people's lives, and sometimes something happens, a situation or something out of the blue, which has impact in their life. But the question is, how do they navigate that situation, and what do they use in their toolkit to manage it? Welcome, Roshni Tulluri, founder of Muddy Barkers. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you, Angela. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining the podcast. Really appreciate that. So, Roshni, could you tell us about your life and what you were doing in your general everyday?
My prior life was very much in the corporate world, and rather than call it a 9 to 5 life, I very much call it the 5 to 9. So that is 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. It was very much about crafting my life around my corporate career, as it were, back then. But I also had a young family, two young girls, nursery age and school age, and a dog, and just a busy household to manage. I would be up at 5 a.m., making lunches, getting myself ready, walking the dog, getting the kids up, getting them ready for their days, sending them off to school, and then going off to work pretty much 5 days a week, which now that I think back, I think, how on earth did I do that? Go into the office 5 days a week. And then, of course, you finish your day's work, you get back home, you let the after school nanny go, and then you're making dinner and going through the bedtime routine. So it was, as I said, very much a 5 to 9 life, and by 9 p.m. you'd be exhausted and in bed and ready to do it all over again.
So, you mentioned the corporate career. Can you tell us more about that and in terms of what you were doing and also the impact it was having on you? Because you did enjoy your job for quite some time.
Yes, I did. I was in finance. It's still a skill that I hold very important today and use very much in my day-to-day life. It was a finance in industry career. I was in the aviation industry. Prior to that, I was in technology and news. It's a skill very much that can transcend all industries. It's a support function, effectively. And what I enjoyed most about it was supporting businesses in their sort of numbers and their strategic direction. And that was most enjoyable for me.
So, you obviously enjoyed and thrived in your career and you were very successful at it. So, that gave you that kind of adrenaline to progress and continue that career for quite some time. So, how long were you doing that for?
Yeah, 18 years before I decided to stop and take my life in a totally different direction.
Mm. And what was that switch? When did that happen? Talk us through that.
So it happened slowly, I would say, and the pandemic was a huge trigger for that. The pandemic came, and I was with two young girls and a very barky dog at home, working from home. Suddenly, lives changed overnight, and I had a 4 and a 7-year-old at home that needed homeschooling. I also had to hold down a full-time job in an industry where actually the majority of the industry was furloughed. There were very few people actually working. So it felt like the majority of the burden was placed on the people that were, left working. I was involved in some very high profile work, which meant that I had to be around, but that was very, very difficult to manage with a dog that needed walking. And actually the dog was a lifesaver, because me and my husband would fight over who could walk her, because we needed to get out the house. There was a time you were in the pandemic and you're like, oh God, you can't leave the house. You were under lockdown, and it feels like a whole lifetime ago. Yeah, it was very difficult to manage when my husband was at home working, trying to navigate his career. We didn't even have the dedicated workspaces at home. There was only one desk because only ever one of us worked from home max, and it wasn't a regular occurrence. So we had to modify our lifestyle. I couldn't, unfortunately, just ask my 4-year-old and 7-year-old to sit in front of a laptop and stay busy, because actually when they were homeschooled, quote unquote, their mum needed to be involved. Their mum or dad needed to actually help them read or help them draw something or help them go in the garden and find some leaves, whatever it was. It was an engaging, parents had to be engaged in homeschooling. It wasn't a case of throw them in front of a screen.
No, no, you had two jobs.
2 jobs, yeah. The first job, the job of a mum and managing the household, was always there, but it just meant that I had to engage with them throughout the day, not
Yeah.
just in the morning and in the evenings.
That must have been quite a revelation for you, because obviously it was such an unusual circumstance that we all found ourselves in, and especially for parents with young children at that point in time, it must have been a real pressure. Oh my goodness, how are we going to navigate this? What are we going to do?
Exactly. You're absolutely right, Angela. And it was a learning experience for both me and my husband. And whilst he was incredibly supportive throughout it and did as much as he possibly could, the reality was, as their mum, young kids especially naturally gravitate towards their mum. And so ultimately mothers end up taking on a lot of the burden, whether it's homeschooling or just simply fixing the kids' lunches or giving them a snack when they're hungry or folding their clothes, as you are. We,
Yeah.
unfortunately, all the three of us, there was an instance where the three of us would actually be on the kitchen counter, my laptop in the middle, one device set up next to me to my left, and one device set up next to me to my right, to try and get them to do what they could so that I could try and join a call in between all of
Yes.
that and navigate my work life.
Unbelievable. But what was it doing for your general well-being and your mental health? What impact was that having on you?
It was very stressful because I had some big deadlines and, like I said, very high profile
Mm,
projects at work that were very time sensitive.
mm,
You don't have that steady thought process. You don't have that steady unbroken time because the
mm,
kids are around you all the time to actually fixate on a piece of work. And so what was happening was my work was constantly interrupted. And finally, when the kids would be in bed, I would be sort of trying to hammer it out from
mm.
sort of 8 till midnight, 1 o'clock, because whatever I couldn't get done during the day meant that I wasn't resting enough or eating properly, because we were trying to balance the home life side of things.
Did you feel that your work was understanding of that kind of work routine? Because obviously, as you say, you were the teacher during the day and in between trying to do your work and then ultimately trying to manage your workload at night.
I think for all workplaces, I think it was hard as well because
Mm,
that everybody was navigating their own set of circumstances at home. Whether you were, a young person that actually looked forward to going to work every day because you didn't have a workspace at home and you didn't really have that social life at home, to older people that had other family pressures like myself. And I would say that it was hard for all workplaces. I shared stories with many colleagues and friends
mm,
of mine that were working. They were trying to be as understanding as possible, but at the end of the day, in the corporate world, they also have a leadership, always have a set of targets to deliver. And the pandemic brought forward a lot of the work that needed to be done because businesses had to restructure in a way that helped them sail through the pandemic or help them
mm.
navigate their way through the pandemic. Whilst the furlough scheme was great, the reality is a lot of business had to shut down and do something with that time to make sure that they were fit and lean and ready to come out of the pandemic.
Interestingly, you mentioned about your dog, and you and your husband were fighting over the dog in terms of who was going to take him for or her for a walk.
Yeah, well, yes.
Isn't it funny how these things always circle back to very simple things, like walking in
Absolutely.
nature?
The irony was, before this, I would be walking the dog quite regularly in the morning. It was usually me. And if we ever wanted a break, we were often fighting, who didn't want to walk the dog, because my
Yeah,
husband was always like, I'm getting late for work. I can't walk the dog. So it's like I was always trying to fit it into my schedule. So the irony of the situation is that there was often no one to walk the dog because we were just too busy with our lives.
yeah, yeah. And then things kind of were still hectic, but in a different way.
Yeah.
But there's an important element to this, because ultimately they always say when you get back to nature, you have moments of time when you need to kind of take a step back. And that was probably a really important time for you during the day to kind of think, okay, it's my time.
Absolutely. And there are certain things that we learned to value in the
Mm,
pandemic, including walking, very much so, because it was one of the few things that you could do. But actually, family activities, we actually turned walking into very much a family activity that we did on the weekends, or we tried to do sort of after school or take a break with one of the kids or both of the kids, because there was not much else you could do to take a break.
mm.
You did start to value the very simple things,
Yes.
um, which was nice because actually life's gone back to being very busy again now.
Yes, yes, very much so. It's very hectic, and you
Very.
just think, oh my goodness, where can I kind of just take a step back and sit down and have my chocolate cake and just not think about anything? That's what it comes
Absolutely.
down
Whatever it is
to.
you like. For me, it's a cup of coffee and, just smell the coffee and take 5 minutes to drink it in the morning. And I always
Yeah,
have my coffee after the kids have gone to school. There's really no point having it before.
yeah, yeah, because as you say, there's always something to do, and it's kind of like
Yes.
your time. So you had this high level career. Obviously, COVID came along and it changed the balance of that in terms of what you were doing, your routine, but obviously you had pressures in another way with the children. So how long did this go on for?
2 years.
My goodness, 2 years.
Yeah.
A long time.
And then we had sort of additional pressures to navigate because actually, as we went through the pandemic, offices started coming back to work,
Yeah.
but the childcare situation wasn't quite there. Were nannies allowed to work? Could they go to school? Schools had half days for certain years, and it was just an unknown situation in terms of, do the kids go to school? Do they not go to school? Which years go to school? Can the nanny come and work? Is it legal for the nanny to come and work for us? All of these new rules and regulations that were imposed upon our lives that we had to then try and figure out whilst again managing our careers and going into the office.
Did you find yourself at any point during that period where you just thought, I just can't do this? I mean, were there any breaking points for you?
Probably more than I can count, to be fair. Yeah, and whilst I joke about it now, there were just, like I say, loads of pressure points where you kind of feel, oh gosh, how am I going to deal with life tomorrow?
Yeah.
Whether it's I have to go to the office or I need to make lunches or I need to, it's what do you do? And then in the mix you throw other family members because I have ailing parents and there was a point where you couldn't see them or you couldn't take care of them. My dad was actually in hospital when the pandemic started and he came out of hospital in the middle of it and had no idea what was going on with life. And we couldn't see him for up to 2 weeks before the pandemic started because all the hospitals had shut down. So lots of different things that you throw in the mix. And yeah, with all of these, with ailing parents and young kids, we very much felt like we were stuck in a very unknown world where you weren't sure where things were going.
So what did you call upon or do? You mentioned walking the dog,
Yeah.
being in nature, but what did you do or what do you tend to do when you find yourself, oh my goodness, my back is against the wall, and then you have to kind of analyze and think, what am I going to do about this? What do you kind of dip into?
I think as most people have often said, as well, with the pandemic, we learned to value family and family time more than anything else. And that was, in a lot of cases, our escape. So whether that was finding a family movie to watch on a Friday or Saturday night, just having a family dinner, we tried to implement all of these new things in family life to provide some structure, but also, increase our bond together as a family. And actually, those were very much our releases. And we value that very much. I think one thing the pandemic did do very well was help improve our family life and our family bonds, whilst it might have impacted our, careers or, the kids' educations. And
Yeah.
to some extent, we're not sure whether we'll ever know.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, it's, as you say, there's close ties with people who are dear to you. That's
Yes.
very important. But sometimes I think in life, what happens is that you may have those close connections, but ultimately you still feel on your own because, as I've kind of mentioned it before, you can't get inside your head. No one else can get inside your head except you. And at the end of the day, you're with yourself 24 hours a day. So it's interesting to see how everyone deals with the changing circumstances in different ways, whether that's going to nature or maybe just withdrawing from talking to people, whatever it may be. So are there any elements that you could draw upon that you'd be happy to share?
I think the withdrawing from people is quite an interesting point you make because I think we connected with a lot of our friends and our families across the world via either social media or phone calls because we had the time to be able to do that. Also, there was this, comparison of life. What's life like for you in India? What's life like for you in the US? And even within the US, what's life like for you? California versus, say, New York. There was so much difference across the world. And so what's life like in France? And I think it provided a new means for us to then reconnect with our friends, which was, I think, really important from a social perspective because you couldn't go out and socialize. And we all had a lot to talk about. The pandemic was the key topic, whoever you talk to, and life and the way people were dealing with it. We found we were very much trying to be as connected as possible. We're on Zoom today. Zoom took off in our family.
Yeah.
Even though I had used Zoom before the pandemic to talk to someone in the US the year before, it really wasn't a thing in my life. But today we're using it, and it's a tool that is indispensable, isn't it?
It certainly is. It certainly is for sure. Would you say that you have a toolkit though? That there are certain things that you will go to just for you that makes you feel in a calmer place maybe a little bit more, okay, it's okay. What is that for you?
For me, it's about taking time out. The world today and life today is very noisy, and it was a lot quieter. And whether that's your phone, my phone's sitting on the side of me and it's been pinging the whole time we've been talking. It's about putting that away, taking half an hour to just sit and think about things, have a coffee if needed be, depends what time of the day it is, and just not talk to anyone, find that quiet space to do so. I've had to do that often. I had plenty of time to do that in the pandemic. Don't really have time to do that much now, unfortunately, and that's what we almost need to get back to that toolkit, if you say. It's too noisy. Life has just gone back to being noisy again.
A lot of noise. It's about trying to find sort of snippets maybe during the week where you can maybe block out some of that noise, because there's always demands, isn't there, being
Yeah.
made on
And
you?
actually, for me, that time has been a coach that I was working with. I was telling about the noise in my life, and the fact that I was trying to set up a business, and she said, maybe you just need to carve out, so you don't feel guilty about it. Carve out a specific time of the day, and for me, that specific time of the day was, and still is to some extent, 9 to 10. So I don't feel so guilty. Sometimes I use that for quiet contemplation, thinking. Or sometimes I'll just use it for grabbing coffee with a friend and taking that time out on my day, or doing the laundry if I have to, just a bit of work around the house. And then at least by 10, I don't feel guilty. And from 10 o'clock onwards, I'm focused on the business and the work at hand and the things I just need to do, so that
Mm.
it is focused time.
Yeah, so it kind of sets you up for the day ultimately.
Exactly.
So
And
if you
then you
did,
don't feel guilty that you're not
yeah,
focusing on the other things in life that do need a bit of attention, including yourself. Going for a
yes,
coffee with a friend isn't something you should feel guilty about, because that's part of the outlet that you have to
yeah,
de-stress from life sometimes, isn't it?
yeah, it's very true. And I think, as you say, the importance of doing that each day, not just once a week,
Exactly.
doing it each day. So it's part of your routine. And then ultimately that accumulates to what, 5 hours at the end of the week of,
Yes,
okay, a bit of me time, which is
exactly.
very important, I think.
Exactly.
Because some people just wait for the weekend to do these things, but ultimately you should be doing a bit each day.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Actually, I would say in my life, I probably don't have that time on the weekend, because then suddenly the family are all over. So actually, it makes and I do work on the weekend as well. When you do have your own business, you do spend a lot of time
Mm,
working out of hours, so to speak,
yeah.
evenings and weekends. But
Mm,
also, the kids have their own social lives, whether it's birthday parties or whether it's their activities on the weekend. So you are running around with the one member of the family or the other.
yeah.
Again, whether it's parents, kids, or parties, it's all
Yeah.
happening.
It's like a big tag team, isn't it?
Yes, it
It's
is
literally like
very
that.
much so.
But so you kind of mentioned about your own business. So let's look at that. So you went through the pandemic for 2 years with this kind of hectic scenario of two jobs, maybe even three. People could actually say that. So you're doing everything. And as you say, my goodness, you thought, right, okay, you're drawing to the close of the pandemic.
Yeah.
What was your mind and thought process at that point in time in terms of maybe changing direction?
So I think the sheer exhaustion of it all probably precipitated all of that, dealing with the pandemic, and then also
Mm,
you throw into the mix going into the office, which wasn't even so hard to think about pre-pandemic, but suddenly became very hard to think about
yeah.
because you had all these other balls in the air. And the sheer exhaustion of it made me think, oh God, I'm not sure I can keep doing this. What would it be like to do something for myself? And obviously we had a number of ideas. Actually, in the pandemic, we had a lot of time to think about doing things a bit differently. And one of the ideas that was always close to my heart was setting up a convenience related pet business. In my corporate life, I lived in the US for 8 years. That is actually where we got our first dog. We've got two dogs now. And in the pandemic, actually, we only had one dog. So we clearly have a pandemic puppy too. And we thought, well, one of the things that made our lives easier in the US was our dog would get muddy and dirty, and we wouldn't like washing her at home because she used to hate bath times. But we actually found this shop in the town that we lived in that had these self-service dog wash machines, and it made our lives easier. For $10, we could wash her, shampoo her, rinse her, shampoo her, condition her, put the flea treatment on, even dry her off, and then take her home. And by the time we got home, we didn't have to deal with the messy cleanup of our bathroom, have to worry about her soiling our carpets or any of that nonsense. We didn't
Mm,
have a garden, we lived in a flat. So it made our lives a lot easier. And then we
mm.
moved to the UK in 2016. A dog came with us. And unfortunately, we had to resort to washing her in the bathtub again. So,
Yeah,
which she hated. And
yeah,
imagine taking a muddy dog up the stairs. If you've got a big one, you've got to let it walk up the stairs and then chuck it in the bathtub again. So it was a
yes,
little bit painful. And so that idea was always at the back of my mind. Why can't we bring this here? Why can't we do something like that here? So the process of market research started during the pandemic, but it took a while for me to build up the courage to
yeah,
leave a stable job, leave a career that I'd spent 18 years building, to just jump out into the unknown. And as a finance person, not having a steady pay slip was the biggest and the most scariest thing for me to get used to. But it got to the point where I thought, you know what, I'm so exhausted. Let's try it.
yeah.
Let's try it. Let's go
Let's just
for
go
a
for
year
it.
or however long. And then we'll think about it. Life hasn't closed its doors for us, so let's
Yeah.
give it a go.
So when was this? When did that happen? When did that kind of start?
We probably started thinking about it quite early on in the pandemic,
Okay,
so 2020, but it
okay,
still took me the better part of 18 months to 2 years to
okay.
muster up the courage to do my market research,
Hmm.
to hand in my notice.
Oh my goodness. How did you
So
feel on that day when you had to hand in your notice?
I felt somewhat relieved
Hmm.
because it meant that actually I was putting into motion my ideas, but it was also really scary because now I knew I had to work my notice and have something ready for the end of it.
Yeah.
What was I going to do at the end of it? And that was almost like falling off a cliff in a way because when I
Mm.
did finish working, I had done so much research. I had worked a bit, but then suddenly my day was unstructured. My day was not working for me, and that's where this 9 to 10 rule came about because
Yeah.
I felt like I was working, but I didn't feel like I was working because I was getting distracted by planning birthday parties and picking kids up or planning play dates and
Yeah.
doing the laundry and then I was intermittently researching and going out and there was just no structure to my days. So that had to change.
I can imagine. So that's quite a jump from corporate career to right, I want to start my own business.
Exactly, exactly. And I think I didn't know how to deal with it, to be honest,
Mm.
which is where I think where you refer to as a toolkit, working through the way, understanding the way you work sometimes
Yeah.
was also important. I was used to so much structure.
Mm.
I had a calendar, I knew how my days were going to go. I checked my diary the week before, the day before. I prepped for where I needed to be. I did a lot of travel as well
Mm.
in my corporate career. So
Yeah.
it was important. I had that structure. And then
Yeah.
I went from that to starting something new where I had done the research, but I didn't know where to take it. And
Mm.
I didn't have that structure because it was just me, myself, and I. Um,
Yeah. And
and that's where you kind of sometimes lose your footing a little bit. And you do
yes.
feel lonely as well because you don't have that social aspect of working with people.
Mm. Mm.
I know in the pandemic we didn't really go to the office, but you still had people on Teams calling you. You still spoke to people.
Yeah.
You used your voice. There were days where I probably didn't say anything to anyone between 9 and 3 because I'm like, who do I talk to?
Yeah. And as you say, being an entrepreneur, it can be quite isolating and lonely at the best of times. So
Yes.
how were you navigating that on, on a mental level?
Um, I wasn't navigating very well in the beginning, to be fair. It was very sort of dejecting, but then I had to keep the positivity up because I'd obviously left my career for a reason to build something called Muddy Barkers, and I had done my research. So I think perseverance, I had to wake up every day and think, right, I need to structure my day a little bit. I need to know what I'm doing. That's where the 9 to 10 rule sort of came about. So I didn't feel
Mm.
guilty about all the other things that were distracting me, and I
Yeah.
dealt with them first, so that then
Mm.
I could focus for 5 hours, as it were, from 10 till about 3 on
Mm.
business related items. And sometimes I did in the evening as well. But I knew that if I could work uninterrupted, that would
Yeah.
help my focus. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not always desk work, right? When you're an entrepreneur, you sometimes think that work you're doing isn't really work. So, for example, I could be sitting on Google and researching a new location for a vending machine. It doesn't
Mm.
feel like work, but it is work.
Yeah.
Likewise, going to a networking event doesn't feel like work, but it
Mm.
is work. You
Yeah.
all of that is, and it all leads to building a business.
Did anyone doubt you and think, oh my goodness, Roshni, what are you doing? Are you mad?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, loads of people probably thought that.
They weren't telling you.
Yeah, maybe they didn't tell me. I do feel that when I was first selling the idea of the self-service dog washers and the vending machines, there were a lot of people going, oh, yeah, no, that's, I don't know. Will that work? I did have a lot of supportive people around me, though, not least my family, but also around me. I'd go to networking events and I would explain to people my idea of what I wanted to do. And they'd be like, that's a great idea. That is a great idea. But of course, I didn't have one to show people until my first one went out. So getting that first vending machine branded, up and running with the right sort of products was a lot of effort and a lot of selling, a lot of hustling, I like to call it. And I still
Yeah.
feel like I'm hustling today, honestly,
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
constantly trying to sell my business and my services.
Mm.
So it hasn't actually stopped.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. In a way, I mean this in the nicest possible way, you're kind of selling yourself as well, because you are the business. It's you. You're
Exactly.
responsible for your business and yourself.
Exactly. When you're selling a concept, people are
Mm,
also buying into you because it was
mm,
very much a concept. I knew that I wanted, and my brand was sorted, Muddy Barker's colours and the brand and the dog and the logo and all that was sorted. And I
mm,
knew that the vending machines had to be branded. But then I
mm.
was actually going out to pubs and parks and saying, how would you like a vending machine that sells stuff for dogs? And a lot of them bought into me,
Yeah.
at least the first two, I would say,
Mm,
and they were also very nice places because
mm.
they were entrepreneurs themselves and understood the challenges and were willing to give us a punt. And here we are today.
So in that journey that you've taken from corporate career to the pandemic, which was very taxing and testing for you, and then obviously going back to work and thinking, I'm not sure if I really want to do this anymore. And then you had this kind of idea that you've been sitting on for quite some time. Do you feel that it's the right decision? And also, are there any other elements that you've incorporated into your life from your toolkit you call upon when you find yourself thinking, oh gosh, what am I doing? Or, oh, I can't do this today, wherever it may be.
Yeah, I think definitely part of the toolkit is around surrounding myself with positive people, good friends that help sort of drive me upwards because I have had many a day where I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Can I continue?
Mm,
Because you do get setbacks in business. And so sometimes if you have to draw upon it within yourself, say, okay, I can do this. Tomorrow will always be a little bit better than
mm,
today. But then also sometimes it's just so hard to get yourself out of that mindset that having a good person to bounce ideas off or just to vent to, someone that relates to what you're going through.
mm,
But there's a lot of them. There's not no single one person for me.
sure.
I have many great friends and family members that I bounce things off of. I find surrounding myself with people to talk about some of these problems is really, really important. Some of the challenges that you have in running a business, because you never know where the next best idea or the next piece of advice will come from.
Very true.
I value talking to people a lot
Yeah.
and don't knock that at all.
We got so used to the Zoom calls, the online meetings, which are part of our lives every day now. Having a conversation face to face with someone, even if it's just for 5 minutes or 2 minutes, even, it adds to your life. It really does enhance your general routine and your mindset. It's very important. I think people underestimate that.
You're right. I think they do. I think social interacting is incredibly important and
Mhm.
more so when you're an entrepreneur. I'm lucky now that I have a small team working for me and there are people that I see when I come to the office every day.
Yeah,
But even then, it is important to be able to talk to people.
yeah,
And even if it's just as simple as good morning, how was your weekend? It's just it gives you that little outlet to just
yeah,
talk about,
yeah.
you know, could
Oh,
be social nothings, but it's just nice to be able to talk to somebody.
yeah. It's very important. And it's a bit like if you're walking down the street and you smile at someone, say hi, and to see their
Yes.
reaction, they might go, oh, or might
It's
go, oh,
contagious.
hello.
I love the whole smiling and saying good morning to
Yeah,
somebody,
yeah, yeah.
because it really kind of makes your day a bit better, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's not cheesy. I've done that myself when I've literally just been walking to work and I said, "Oh, good morning," or smiled, and the reaction I get has been very mixed. On the whole, it's been positive. On the whole, it's been positive. But I really do believe, you set a positive tone for the day, and you're setting out a positive vibe as well. You're giving out a positive vibe, and that's really important because people pick up on that.
People do, you're right. And I think I've realized that more now leading a small team is that I need to drive that positivity because I've got people that are much younger, much more inexperienced working for me. And if I'm dejected about where I am today, that's not going to bode well for the next
Yeah,
generation, the rest of the
yeah,
team, all the rest of it. And
yeah.
but trust me when I say sometimes it is hard to do, and I totally relate. So you're right, drawing upon that for yourself, or just picking up the phone, or just finding someone to talk to for a few minutes is a really, really important asset.
Also, circling back to what you enjoy, because people forget that, as responsibilities grow as you get older, like it could be just listening to that music track, it could be just dancing in the kitchen, very simple things that you find fun to do, just even if it's just for 5 minutes, that the power of that is pretty high. I think people underestimate that.
That you do. And one of the things that I like to do is, like we talked about at the beginning, walk the dog. Unfortunately, our old dog is too old now to go to the park. In the pandemic, we were fighting over her, and she's
Yeah.
still with us, bless her. But the younger one that we added to our family 2.5 years ago now, she's a little whippersnapper, needs running around. And so sometimes just taking her to the park, watch her gleefully run after a ball and chase a ball mindlessly sometimes, because she is a bit silly that way. It's a good distraction. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll be in the park and I will have my earphones on if I need to make some calls or talk to somebody. It's a good time for me to watch her run around and also call somebody and just de-stress a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's really essential. Those kind of the baselines of life, I think people forget as the responsibilities grow, or you become busier and busier, and you kind of lose sight of that. So it's really essential to kind of circle back to what actually make you happy. And people forget that in this journey of life.
Absolutely. The simple things, right? And that for me is very much around family time. We try to protect certain things, family time, walking. One of the things that I've found is that I talk to my family, certainly my kids, a lot better when we're walking than when we're sitting at home, because it's a habit that we've kind of built up over the years. I think the pandemic years were forming of those habits in a way.
Yeah, as you say, pluses and minuses, but hopefully more pluses and minuses.
Yes. Yeah. You value what's important, I think, to you.
Yeah, it's very important, especially during the pandemic, what is important and what you need to do more of. You don't have to do grandiose things. It can be something quite simple to enable you to just get back to feeling a bit more centered. I think that's the best place to be, centered, because a week is kind of like that, right?
Absolutely, I agree. There are ups and downs every day, every day of the week. And so it's important to get back to what makes you feel like I can deal with this.
Thank you for watching and listening. I have certainly taken great inspiration from today's podcast story, and hope you have too. If you have a story you would like to share, get in touch via my YouTube channel, the Spots of Time podcast, and please do click subscribe, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Angela Kanwar.